Now, in a moment, we will be joined for more reaction from my Sky News presenter and colleague Chris Kenny for his take on what we've heard so far on an explosive day, and there's plenty to come out of this. Yes, Gladys Berejiklian has, of course, stepped away, but what about Dominic Perrottet still in the job or in her job now? First, let's play you one more exchange from today's evidence where former Premier Gladys Berejiklian confirms Daryl Maguire had a key to her Sydney home, but she maintains despite that level of closeness, she didn't feel the need to disclose the relationship.
Now, you saw in Mr Maguire's evidence he referred to the fact that he had a key to your, I think it's your current house, is that right?
He had, yes.
He was given that key soon after you moved into your current house, is that right?
I can't recollect exactly the time.
Or did he have a key to your preceding house?
No. Not that I know.
Did you ever ask for that key back?
No.
I take it you've changed your locks since giving the key to Mr Maguire?
I have.
Joining me live now is Sky News commentator Chris Kenny. Chris, this was one of the more difficult things I thought for Gladys Berejiklian to explain, that on the one hand, what she has called a close personal relationship, they've both now spoken about love. Texts included her saying that she felt he was part of his family, that he was in her circle of love. But on the other hand, it didn't represent any form of conflict of interest and nobody needed to know about it.
Yeah, I think this is the key issue for Gladys Berejiklian, but I have a pretty different view on this because you've got to consider the fact that this relationship wasn't shared with her sisters, with her family, with her close friends. So that kind of proves the point, doesn't it? If Gladys Berejiklian really thought this was a relationship that was locked in and was going to go somewhere, she would have told family and friends about it before declaring it in a professional sense to her political colleagues. So I think that reality probably supports her case. I think the other point here too is that he's a political colleague. And while this has been fascinating to see all of this detail roll out, those people who have worked in politics, people like me who've worked in politics, understand that these sorts of relationships exist between all cabinet ministers and all backbenchers, all MPs. This sort of lobbying, this sort of special pleading, this sort of bargaining and pleas for intervention, it goes on all the time. Now, obviously, in hindsight, a lot of Gladys Berejiklian's ministerial colleagues in particular would have liked to have known about this relationship. But in the end, it's a political deal. It's a political boondoggling. I think the two key facts, the two things we can be certain about that have come out of all these revelations are that one is that Gladys Berejiklian made a bad choice in her romantic partner, that Daryl Maguire is a dodgy politician, not a particularly nice person, and she would have done better not to have that relationship. But secondly, it's exposed from the inner workings, I suppose, through these phone taps, how political boondoggling goes on, how we see this pork barrelling unfurled through marginal seats or sensitive seats around the country. And it's not very, very pretty. But what we've seen so far certainly doesn't amount to a case of corruption.
So on whatever you call it, boondoggling, pork barrelling, and we've heard people being upfront about this within the New South Wales government before. There's nothing illegal about that. There's no corruption. In fact, Gladys Berejiklian, in this particular inquiry, has just said this was all about trying to make sure we won a seat. You're allowed to do that in government. To the victor go the spoils. I guess the interesting issue I find on the declaration, though, Chris, is, and I understand what you say, people within governments have relationships, and Gladys Berejiklian mentioned this as well. People are close, they don't declare that every single time. And she is an intensely private person, clearly. But at what point does this relationship, which nobody knew about, is there a higher standard for a treasurer or a premier to at least inform people of this so they know where she's coming from? Because a lot of those close relationships you were talking about, people know about. People know who's close with whom within politics. They didn't know about this, including the Premier at the time and her colleagues when she was Premier.
Yeah, look, it would have been easier for everyone if it was known now. This is part of the problem for Gladys Berejiklian. It's just that this relationship was private. But the point is that the dealings they were involved in were only political. These are the same sort of dealings you're involved in with other ministers, other members of parliament, other backbenchers. So they're only political dealings. There's nothing she had to declare in terms of some sort of commercial arrangement or the like. So it's a fascinating concept. The ICAC investigation seems to be almost suggesting that there could be a conflict of interest in the way you deal out government favours within the government. Now, my view is that this is all very public. I disagree with the amount of largesse thrown at Wagga, but it's very public. These announcements are made by the politician who has a direct political link to the Premier. They're in the same party. It's so obvious. We criticise these things from the outside because it looks like pork barrelling, a Liberal Premier looking after a Liberal backbencher. But the idea that you would give special favours because of a romantic involvement, I think is a really strange concept to overlay in politics, because politicians make these decisions day in, day out for their colleagues. And their unifying factor, if you like, is that they're the same political party. Some of them are factional enemies, some of them are great mates, some of them are secret lovers. But the key factor surely is the political one.
Not as many secret lovers as the other one, but we
don't know. We don't know, Tom.
Well,
this is my point. It's extraordinary, extraordinary situation.
We're nearly out of time. Can I just get your thoughts in 30 seconds? So the key element or allegations of corruption to do with Daryl Maguire, Gladys Berejiklian had no direct say in those, but this is where ICAC can pursue something or try to assess or prove whether there was a suspicion from Gladys Berejiklian. So that's going to be the key from here. Could she or should she have reasonably have known what Daryl Maguire might have been up to? So far we've heard a bit today about the $1.5 million he thought he was in line to make and clear his debts off.
Yeah, I think this is the real key concern for Gladys Berejiklian. The stuff we've just spoken about, I think is ugly, it's embarrassing for her, but I don't think it amounts to a hill of beans. But this bloke is dodgy, this bloke is corrupt, and he's telling her about all sorts of wheeling, dealing and grand plans he has. Did she have any inkling that he was up to no good? Did she have any inkling that perhaps she should have passed on to others? There's nothing definitive so far, but we can see that the ICAC counsel assisting here, Mr Robertson, is going down this path, and they have a lot of phone taps, and who knows what he could pull out this afternoon or indeed on Monday. But that's where you would think the questions are. Could she have known that Daryl Maguire was dodgy?
We'll find out more from 2 o'clock. The line we kept hearing last time, I don't need to know that, when he started talking about his various irons in the fire. Chris, thank you. We'll let you get back to
Tom.
a big afternoon, I know.